Welcome back to Chris in Retro. Tonight's video is going to be a message of prevention and speaking about what I believe to be the only real solution for drug addiction, mental health related issues, and those types of things. There's a lot of work and a lot of treatment and things like that go around it, but a recent report that came out, that's an annual report, I think highlights a lot of things from a statistics perspective that makes a lot of sense. Now, with this video, I'm going to take on a few angles here, but we'll speak about the information here in a minute. But I want to talk about addiction on whole and make a point that I feel like when we talk about overdoses and the opioid crisis and things like that, it's real easy for us to make it somebody else's problem. It's their issue. We probably have pictures in our head that we've seen, like the skinny, pregnant, filthy looking woman that's on the street somewhere, obviously struggling with addiction. We picture that person. Well, that's not me. That's what that is. We'll see a man in a pile of trash and a knit hat with busted up sneakers. That's what it looks like. It's not me. We'll see countless videos on YouTube of Kensington and Philadelphia and see people basically looking like human statues because they're on something and they're frozen in time pretty much on that street. That's them. That's not me. I think it's real easy for us to disassociate with the opioid crisis and with overdose because it doesn't present itself to us on a day in and out basis right in front of our face. However, statistically, it's pretty obvious that this is becoming ever increasing problem and creeping closer and closer to home. Many of those people that you see on those streets all started in a home, and with use happening in a home or at a party among friends or any number of places. Addiction can often happen because of trauma and mental health issues. What I'm going to go through here today is going to really target what stands out to me on a report that, while it probably wasn't too surprising to me overall, if I'm really honest with myself, it's still shocking to see it every single time you see these types of things present themselves. And so I want to talk about that for a minute, but I also want to challenge your thinking. In preparation for this video, I talked to Sam and, she presented some ideas I think that were pretty important that I'd like to share. When we think of, when I think of this idea that we don't associate with overdose and opioids, we also don't associate with plane crashes necessarily. But if there's a plane crash and there's 100 people on board, we hear terms like 100 lost souls. It's very noble. I'm not trying to minimize that loss, but you hear what I'm saying. It's almost noble to die in a plane crash because you're a lost soul. Doesn't matter if you'd murdered somebody and nobody ever found out about it. Doesn't matter if you were cheating on your wife and you're on the way there. It doesn't matter if you had some other sinister plan or you were robbing people blindly from their pension fund. Doesn't matter if you're on that plane, you're a lost soul. And that's what we'll hear about. If somebody dies of a chronic illness, of some other chronic illness, we hear gone too young. We'll hear that the great mom, the greatest person in the community, everything else is so tragic. She fought bravely till the end, these types of things. That's fine. And it should be there for that type of person to honor somebody's life. But for somebody that's struggling with addiction and they lose their life, they're a 23-year-old female found deceased on such and such avenue. They're a 24-year-old man, unresponsive, possible overdose. That's all you hear is a quick news bite, but they're also a lost soul, so to speak. Why do we do that? I think it's a couple reasons. One is we don't associate with it, as I said. And the second one is it's so complicated, we don't know how to solve it once the ship has sailed. And so that's what I want to present to you today is a possible place that we can shine some light on this thing and get it before the ship, quote unquote, sails. So here's a report that was published this week. It's an annual report. It's been done since 1971. And this is on 2021 information, post-pandemic, well, towards the end of the real serious isolation. It's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMSHA. They're under the United States Health and Human Services Division. You also know another couple organizations that are on there, like the CDC, Center for Disease Control. They all fall into this category. SAMHSA puts out their national survey, and on there it's a drug use and health survey, and the results are detailing mental health illness and substance use disorder. This happens to be the levels in 2021. I'm going to go down through here and talk about a few things. One is there's no comparison over for 21 to 22. And the reason for that is because the methodology had to be changed to even understand how to capture that data, and that's not available to us yet. So it is unfortunate. I won't comment on my feelings on that and why that may have not been done in time, but I just trust that it must have been complicated enough that they couldn't have comparative data to what 2021 presented. There's a few things in here. Now, this is a long report. Again, you can go to samhsa.gov, samhsa.gov to find this report if you want to, or you can go through the nonprofit shatterproof.org has some commentary on this and this link as well. That happens to be where I got it from. But the first piece of information that stood out to me is that we're measuring this from age 12. So that's your first indicator that I'll get to the point in a minute, but we're starting this data at age 12, kids. In 2021, people aged 12 or older, 61.2 million people, that's 21.9% of our population, used illicit drugs. Almost 22% of our population used illicit drugs that were 12 and older. The most commonly used was marijuana. That's not a surprise. It was a little over half of that. Nearly 2 in 5 young adults, meaning 18 to 25-year-olds, 2 people out of 5 in the 18 to 25s used illicit drugs in 21, and 1 in 3 of those used marijuana. So marijuana is pretty prevalent. A lot of people find value in it. I personally don't. The observations I've seen in other people is they get not hallucinations. They have insomnia, increased depression, anxiety, and I see it oftentimes turn into a gateway for younger people. I'm not saying so much that somebody's been out there for a while, but I don't see it helping anybody necessarily from a mental health perspective alone. Can't speak about anything else on this. The other point that really stood out to me here is that 46.3 million people aged 12 or older met the applicable DSM-5 criteria for having a substance use disorder in that year. So what does that mean? Well, DSM-5 criteria is the baseline, pretty much standard for assessing whether somebody has an addiction. So I'll say it again. In 2021, 46.3 million people, 12 and older. That's 16.5% of our population by our known criteria was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Let that sink in. That's a ship that's already sailed. So I want you to understand what happens when we don't do appropriate prevention. This is what we're dealing with today. And I'm sure that in 2022 it increased because not a lot of things changed. So we know that 16.5% of our population is addicted. Forget about using, addicted. That's scary. 24 million of them, it was drugs. 29 was alcohol, 24 was drugs. And the 29 one doesn't surprise me as much because we saw a huge increase in alcohol consumption post-pandemic or during the pandemic. Now, here's the one that really is a bleak outlook for those that are currently addicted. This was a stat that really troubled me in terms of how this problem is compounding. And that is that in 2021, 94% of the people that were diagnosed that met that criteria, 94% of them did not seek treatment. And in the vast majority of that just didn't think they needed it. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because they didn't get help then. They probably aren't getting help now. And for every year that happens, there's another group of that exact same subset coming into the population, and this thing is just growing out of control. The other side of that is that even without that 94% that was diagnosed as addicted or met the criteria for addiction, not diagnosed, but met the criteria for addiction, that 94% of those that met the criteria for addiction did not enter the treatment community. It's almost a blessing they didn't, because the treatment community currently is overwhelmed. They're short-staffed, they're underpaid, underqualified staff, exhausted, no places to put people in beds, no funding, programs closing, all kinds of impropriety going on inside of programs because of the type of people they're bringing in and the nature of the population coming in, and no supervision while they're there. It's just a mess. That's without this 94% of the population or 94% of those that met this criteria for addiction last year in 2021. Let that sink in. That's a big problem that we're dealing with. So this is the nature of where we are with addiction. And again, it's starting at 12 years old, all this information. I'll go to the next piece of information that really is going to be where I'll land on this report. I would definitely say go back in and take a look at this if you're curious about the subject matter. But if you look under major depressive episodes among adolescents, major depressive episodes. In 2021, 1 in 5 adolescents had a major depressive episode. Of those, nearly 75% had symptoms consistent with near impairment. I'll say it again. 1 in 5 adolescents had a serious episode. 75% of them, it was impairment. I'll say it one more time. 1 in 5 of our kids had a severe episode, and 75% of them led to impairment. This is not addiction. This is mental health stuff. Where do you think that's going to lead for them? We know mental health issues. We know trauma leads to substance use and addiction. It's a place to hide. It's a way to self-medicate when nobody around you is available to help, or if you don't even know how to get help or who to go to. How many 12-year-old kids do you know that could possibly, especially if they've had a major depressive episode, how many of them do you know even know what to ask for to get them to a better place, especially if it led to some kind of an impairment? But yet we'll give them crap about their poor school grades. We'll give them a hard time about their social issues. We'll give them a hard time about being slobs or whatever else. But yet we don't recognize what's got them there. Instead of guiding them to better days, we keep forcing them into the box that doesn't work and wonder why it turns into an addiction that leads to 16.5% of our current population addicted. I don't think it's hard to see the math here and where our focus, I think, can be. So this report, I would strongly encourage you to go take a look at it, and you'll get more information. But what I want to do is talk about now this prevention message. We can no longer afford to say it's those people and their problem. I might be able to have a one-on-one conversation with you and get you relatively sensitive to the severity of it within your life. I might even be able to jog your memory where you can recall some friend of yours from high school that you remember dying or having a serious addiction, or yeah, I think he lost his family because of that, or I think he went to jail because of it. We might even be able to get to that level where it does touch you. And you might ponder that situation and be a little upset about it. But I still don't even think in that scenario I could drive it to you to say that it actually is an impact for you. I'm not trying to raise up a bunch of feel-good soldiers that go out there and try to do this thing to look good. I'm not at all. But I think what we can do is all do our part to help prevent. And how would I do that? Well, do for me a favor right now. We're going to start this exercise right now, right here on this channel. I want you to ponder 5 children around 12 years old. Do you know 5 children around 12 years old? If you're my age, they're probably kids, maybe children of yours. Maybe they're cousins or grandsons or granddaughters. Think about those 5 kids. Look at their face by name. Statistically, one of them had a major episode that led to impairment from depression. Now we're going to look at that as depression. Now, if we let that go, the way this plays out, eventually it could turn to addiction. Now that kid's a drug addict. That kid's got a drug problem. So now we're fixing a drug problem. We're fixing his misbehavior. We're fixing criminal activity where he's stealing to feed his disease. We're fixing her activity because she's done other things to feed her disease. But yet we won't rigorously invest in the child that's the one out of the 5 while they're a kid and had one of these episodes that now you can't say you didn't know about because I just shared with you it's happening. It's not their problem. It's our problem to help them see a way. Now on this channel, I've talked a lot about that. Chris in Retro and the tagline, closer than it appears. I say high risk living is complete collapse is closer than it appears. I certainly can attest to that. But I also say hope is closer than it appears too. When you're really busted up and you really don't know where to go, I tell you what, I didn't see a lot of hope in 2017 wrapped in a roll of insulation in a barn upstairs. I didn't see hope there. And in fact, I really was just longing for my next drink. There was no hope there for me. But where hope came is when somebody came alongside of me. Now, I was well into my 40s when all heck broke loose, but all along these mental health triggers, had I known, I probably could have got ahead of that at some point. I may not have. I don't know. My story is different than others. But if we're going back to a 12-year-old kid that doesn't understand why they feel so horribly, and they can't understand why they have no energy, and they're getting all this crap about their grades being bad, and their parents are not investing. As parents, you're not investing. You're letting your kid just stay out of your hair with video games and whatever else. And then all of a sudden, magically, we have a problem when we're showing up after court date, after court date, after court date, hospital bed, wondering why the kid's not coming home at night, just waiting to get the call from the police that this child has overdosed and died. Waiting for the time when they are 24-year-old Johnny, possible 24-year-old male, possibly deceased, found on the sidewalk on whatever avenue, found in a dumpster behind the drugstore, behind Episcopal church, whatever. These are all real stories in our community. I'm sure they are in yours. And in fact, I could probably pull up right now from today police beats from Rochester, New York, and a descriptions exactly like that would be on there. I could almost promise it because it's there every single day. I would like to get ahead of that. I don't, you never wish for your loved ones to pass, but when they do, I don't want it to be, their gender and their location and their age and a speculation about what it was, and that's the end of it. Let's get with these kids and get with them, close to them, recognizing they might be resistant to the help. But how about as parents, we actually work on our homes so that the home is a structure where they feel like they can thrive and communicate and address these issues. As adults, how about we take a real serious look at how we're behaving? How are we feeling? Do we have mental health issues that are unaddressed? Do we have substance use issues? In your dry January effort, are you finding that you had some withdrawal symptoms? Are you finding maybe your family is starting to see you starting to embrace this notion of not drinking, and they're getting a little bit more energy about them because dad's not going to be drunk anymore? I would like you to think about it. My challenge to you is think of those 5 kids. Consider which one, I'm not saying figure out which one has a problem for you, but maybe if it's 5 kids that you love and are close to your family, which one are you willing to dispose of at the lack of your effort to help? Kind of harsh. But if you're not doing anything, you're essentially saying it's okay. I appreciate you guys tuning into this little bit of a rant here tonight. I saw this report come out. There's some great information in it. Our focus really needs to be on prevention. We have to make sure that to ever get ahead of the drug use and ever get ahead of mental health issues in this country, to reduce the 16.5% in 2021 that by all criteria were addicted to drugs and alcohol, to ever get ahead of that, and to ever fix that problem, and to get that number going down, we should start in the 1 in 5 adolescents that had that first traumatic event that we can do something about to intervene there. That effort is well more worth our time than waiting until we're trying to deal with 16.5% year after year after year becoming addicted to drugs and alcohol. Thank you for your time. Please like, subscribe, and comment. If you like the video, please share. I really appreciate your support of the channel. We got a lot of good things coming up this week. I'm super excited. My next guest is somebody I have so much respect for. He's shown a ton of grace to even come on this channel based on his status in the YouTube community. And, as small as we are here, but we got a common message. And I think that'll be the point that's really going to resonate with you. I hope you love hearing what you hear from him. I'm excited to have Jesse on fire on the channel here coming up. But until then, please stay productive and stay out of trouble.